Each week, American History TV's American Artifacts takes viewers behind the scenes at archives, museums, and historic sites. Here's a featured extra from a recent program.
Throughout the history of this church, people can talk about famous people who have been here, but most of the people who were members of St. John's were not famous people. They were ordinary citizens who wished to go to a church service somewhere near their neighborhood. When Washington experienced the horrific event of the British burning the Capitol in 1814, almost 1 year to the day after that summer, the cornerstone was laid. And at that time, the editor of the National Intelligencer newspaper wrote an editorial which sort of summed up what the feeling was at the time and what St. John's, in its own way, symbolized to the people at large. And I'm going to quote that statement. "And reflecting on that same day, only 12 months ago," that's referring to August of 1814 when the Capitol was burned, "the ruins of the President's house and of the executive offices still enveloped the spot with their smoke, upon which this solemn ceremony was performed, the laying of the cornerstone of St. John's. That heart must have been callous indeed that did not feel more sensibly than on any other occasion the warmest gratitude to that being whose providence has opened to the whole nation, and more especially to the inhabitants of this district, the most cheering prospects for the future, prospects that impart additional satisfaction and derive superior brightness from the recollection of our past distresses and our almost hopeless humiliations. The Church of St. John's is situated on a beautiful ridge, exactly north of the President's house on the President's Square, a situation surpassed in scenery by few of the many exquisite spots in which the site of Washington abounds. It is built from the designs and under the direction of Mr. Latrobe, the architect of the Capitol, who has endeavored to distinguish it by a style of chaste simplicity and a character of architecture adapted to the singular beauty of its position." So in the view of the leaders of Washington at that time, the building of this church represented a new beginning for the city of Washington. Now, subsequent to that time, St. John's had any number of special services and funerals, weddings, and the like. One of the most famous was that of Dolly Madison. Dolly Madison obviously was the first lady to attend St. John's, and obviously soon after that event that I just described. And when her husband died in 1836, she decided to move back to Washington. She moved back to a house which is on one corner of Lafayette Square, very close to St. John's, and she lived there until her death in 1849. When she came back to Washington, she was baptized in St. John's and confirmed by the Bishop of Maryland in this church. And when she died, her funeral was conducted from this church, and it was attended by everyone. The entire cabinet, the President of the United States, all the city fathers. And at that service, one of the pallbearers was a man whose name has been lost to history, Stephen Pleasanton. Stephen Pleasanton was an original member of St. John's Church. He was a clerk in the State Department in 1814. And when the fires of Washington had yet to take place, James Monroe, who was his boss, the Secretary of State, was out scouting to see of the disposition of British military forces. He concluded that there was a very strong probability that Washington would be attacked and possibly burned. So he sent a writer back to the State Department who contacted Stephen Pleasanton and said, "I think you should secure all the important papers of the United States." Stephen Pleasanton then got wagons. He had bags made out of coarse linen. He secured all the major records of the United States at that time that were in the possession of the State Department, including the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, other records of the Senate that had not been released, treaties, Washington's commission, Washington's resignation document, but obviously most importantly the Declaration of Independence. He took these wagons across the river around Chain Bridge After thinking about it, he concluded because there was a foundry too close at hand that the British might think would be useful in providing munitions, he continued on a journey where he took those wagons all the way to Leesburg, Virginia, and had them stored in a secure place there, and he went to bed, exhausted. That night, the citizens of Leesburg, Virginia, saw all of Washington in flames and told Pleasonton about that when he woke up the next morning. And Pleasonton recalled an exchange he had had as he was taking the documents out of the State Department to safe keeping. He ran into the Secretary of War of the time, who saw what he was doing and said, "But wait a minute, why are you doing this? I think you're being extremely alarmist. There's no point. Washington is not going to be invaded by the British." And Pleasonton said, "I think it's a point of prudence to do it. I work for the Secretary of State and I'm going to do it." And he carried on. If Stephen Pleasonton had not secured those documents, today you could not go to the National Archives and see the Declaration of Independence. You could not see the Constitution of the United States in its original form and all the other precious documents of American history that were kept at the State Department during that time. Now, when Dolly Madison died and her funeral was conducted from St. John's, many of the major figures of Washington society and government were pallbearers at that funeral. But there was one person that most people would not normally recognize when they looked at that pallbearer list. It was Stephen Pleasonton. People had forgot about him and what he did, but in 1849, everyone knew what role he had played in saving the precious national documents of the United States. People did know also that Dolly Madison had saved the portrait of George Washington that was in the White House as she was fleeing the building. So clearly to the people of Washington at that time, they saw the connection between the two and made sure that he had that honored place as a pallbearer. That funeral service left St. John's and it went all the way to 18th Street southeast to Congressional Cemetery, where Dolly Madison was interred in a vault until her remains could be taken to Orange, Virginia, and buried with her husband. But everybody knew that she represented a major period in American history. Stephen Pleasonton did as well, and the two of them together are one of those elements of American history and St. John's Church that are worth remembering.
You can view more American Artifacts programs online at cspanvideo.org. Enter American Artifacts in the search box.